The fire-red leaves of autumn clung desperately to the trees of Shadow Creek, Montana, like memories unwilling to fade into winter's oblivion. Ray Holloway stood at the edge of his property, squinting through his good eye at the valley below. The other eye, hidden beneath a web of scars, saw only shadows, a permanent reminder of what he'd lost. At 53, Ray was a ghost of the man he once was. His weathered hands, once steady enough to capture the most elusive wildlife on film, now trembled slightly as he adjusted the worn strap of his camera. National Geographic covers wildlife conservation awards, speaking engagements around the world, all relegated to the past. "What do you think, old friend?" he murmured to Kodiak, the aging hunting dog that hadn't left his side in 12 years. Another day at Northwind Edge. The dog's gray muzzle lifted his cloudy eyes, reflecting a loyalty that transcended words. Like Ray, Kodiak was a survivor clinging to life with quiet dignity. The name Northwind Edge had once meant something, Ray's sanctuary, his and Sarah's dream. Now it was just another property on the brink of foreclosure, another piece of Montana waiting to be carved up by developers like Preston Blackwood and his Horizon Unlimited Corporation. Ray's fingers traced the foreclosure notice in his pocket. Third one this year. The bank was running out of patience and he was running out of options. He hadn't taken a photograph worth selling in 3 years. Not since Sarah's death. Not since the accident. "Come on, boy, let's get inside before the cold sets in." The old ranch house creaked its welcome as Ray stepped inside, shaking off the chill. The walls were adorned with his past glories, photographs of wild Mustangs racing across plains, wolves hunting in packs, eagles soaring above untouched wilderness. Each image a testament to a connection he once felt with the natural world, a connection now as damaged as his vision. The phone rang, echoing through the empty house. Ray let it go to voicemail, knowing who it would be. Maya, his daughter, a stranger wearing familiar jeans. "Dad, it's me." Maya's voice, crisp and professional, filled the room. "I've been trying to reach you for days. The bank called me again. I can help with the finances, but you need to be reasonable about selling. I'll be in town tomorrow for work. We need to talk. Please, just call me back." Ray deleted the message without returning the call. Maya, with her Seattle law firm and her environmental crusades, couldn't understand why he clung to this place. She'd left Shadow Creek the day after her high school graduation and never looked back. Now 32, she lived in a world of legal briefs and corporate negotiations, a world where his stubborn attachment to a failing ranch made no sense. "She doesn't get it, does she, Kodiak?" Ray muttered, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey. "Some things aren't for sale." The irony wasn't lost on him. Maya fighting environmental battles in courtrooms, while he fought his own by simply refusing to leave. Different methods, same stubborn Holloway blood. That night, Ray dreamed of Sarah. Not the Sarah of the hospital beds and chemotherapy, but the vibrant woman who had once ridden alongside him through these valleys, who had taught their daughter to identify bird calls and track deer. In the dream, she was pointing toward the mountains, her lips moving without sound. Warning him, or guiding him. He couldn't tell which. He woke with a start, Kodiak's wet nose pressed against his hand. Outside, the wind howled, carrying whispers of change. The livestock auction wasn't a place Ray frequented anymore. Time was when he'd come to photograph the characters, the cowboys, the weather-beaten faces that told the story of American ranching tradition. Now he stood at the back of the crowd, his collar turned up against the cold and the stares. "Didn't expect to see you here, Holloway," said Walter Jenkins, the auction manager, eyeing Ray's camera bag with surprise. "Finally back to work." Ray shook his head. "Just passing through." "Ha ha, shame. Your magazines used to put Shadow Creek on the map." Ray nodded non-committally, his attention drifting to the corral where the day's livestock waited their turn. Cattle mostly, a few horses, nothing special, until the last pen. Even from a distance, Ray could see something was wrong. The horse, little more than a colt, stood trembling, ribs visible beneath a dull coat. Its head hung low, but there was something about its stance, a defiance in the way it positioned itself, that caught Ray's photographer's eye. "That one's next," Walter said, following Ray's gaze. "Poor thing. Rescue from the Blackwood property line. Found wandering, half-starved. No brand, no papers." "Blackwood?" Ray's interest sharpened. Preston Blackwood's 20,000-acre estate bordered the national forest and Ray's modest property. Yep, his men brought it in. Says if no one claims it, he might take it for his new equestrian center. PR stunt, if you ask me. Man wouldn't know a horse from a hole in the ground 2 years ago. The auctioneer's voice crackled over the speakers. Next up, lot 47. Male colt approximately 2 years old. No papers found stray. Starting bid $50. Do I hear 50? Ray moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't explain. The colt raised its head, revealing a distinctive white star, marking on its forehead. Something stirred in Ray's memory, a photograph he'd taken years ago. A rare breed, thought extinct in these parts. $50, someone called. 50, do I hear 75? The horse's eyes met Ray's one good eye, meeting two frightened ones across the dusty corral. 75, Ray called out, surprising himself. A murmur went through the crowd. Ray Holloway bidding on livestock, the man who could barely take care of himself. 75 to the gentleman in back. Do I hear 100? 100, came a smooth voice from the entrance. Preston Blackwood in his designer rancher outfit that had never seen a day's honest work strolled in, flanked by two associates. I believe that animal was found on my property line. I have an interest in its welfare. Ray felt his jaw tighten. 150. Blackwood smiled thinly. 200. The crowd's heads swiveled between the two men like spectators at a tennis match. Everyone knew the history, how Blackwood had tried to buy Northwind Edge 3 times, how Ray had refused despite mounting debts. 250, Ray countered, ignoring the voice of reason screaming in his head. He couldn't afford groceries, let alone a horse. 300, Blackwood said smoothly. 500, Ray shot back. Blackwood's smile faltered. 750. 1,000. The words left Ray's mouth before he could stop them. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $1,000 for lot 47. Do I hear 1,100? Blackwood studied Ray, then shook his head slightly. Let him have it. Probably won't survive the winter anyway. The gavel fell. Sold to Ray Holloway for $1,000. As the crowd dispersed, Ray approached the pen, wondering what madness had possessed him. The colt watched him warily, trembling. You've lost your mind, Holloway, Ray muttered to himself. Completely lost it. I'd have to agree, came a voice behind him. Ray turned to find Maya standing there, briefcase in hand, disapproval etched in every line of her face. She looked so much like Sarah, it hurt to look at her. $1,000 you don't have for a horse you can't take care of. This is exactly why I had to come back. Maya, Ray said, genuinely surprised. I thought you were coming tomorrow. I caught an earlier flight when the bank called again. Her eyes softened slightly as she looked at the colt. What were you thinking? I don't know, Ray admitted. There's something about him. Look at the markings. Maya glanced at the horse. It's malnourished and probably ill. It needs a vet, proper feed shelter, none of which you can afford right now. I'll manage. How by ignoring more bills? She sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. Dad, I didn't come here to fight. I came because Horizon Unlimited made another offer on the property. Triple the market value. It would solve everything, the mortgage, your medical bills, everything. Ray stiffened. Blackwood sent you? What, no. I'm here to help you, not... She broke off, then continued more carefully. Blackwood Developments is a client of our firm, yes, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because you're about to lose everything, and I'm trying to stop that from happening. By selling to the man who's trying to turn the entire valley into luxury condos, by being practical, the valley is changing, Dad. Fighting it is just what's standing up for something. I thought that's what you did for a living. Maya's expression hardened. I fight battles I can win. And I use the system, not just stubbornness. This property is drowning you. Has been since Mom died. The mention of Sarah hung between them, an open wound neither knew how to heal. A ranch hand approached, leading the colt. Where do you want him delivered, Mr. Holloway? Before Ray could answer, another voice joined the conversation. I'd recommend getting him checked out before you take him home. A woman with copper skin and jet black hair, pulled into a practical braid, approached. She wore a veterinarian's jacket with Shadow Creek Animal Clinic embroidered on the pocket. I'm Elena Redhawk. I was watching the bidding. That horse needs immediate attention. Ray recognized her vaguely, the new vet who'd taken over old Doc Summers' practice last year. I can handle it. Elena raised an eyebrow. With all due respect, Mr. Holloway, this animal is severely undernourished and may have other issues. I have my truck here. I can transport him to my clinic, give him a full workup, and deliver him to your place tomorrow. I don't have money for first consultations free, she interrupted. Consider it professional curiosity. This colt has unusual markings I'd like to document. Maya shot Ray a look. See, even the vet thinks you can't handle this. That's not what I said, Elena corrected evenly. I just believe in starting relationships on the right foot, human and equine. Ray hesitated, then nodded. Fine. Check him over. Northwind Edge Ranch, end of Cottonwood Road. I know it, Elena said. Something in her tone made Ray look at her more closely. There was recognition there, but not the kind he was used to. Not the aren't you that famous photographer kind. Something else. I'll bring him by tomorrow morning. As Elena led the colt away, Maya turned back to Ray. We still need to talk about the property. Not today, Ray said firmly. I've made too many bad decisions already. That's exactly why we need to talk, Maya persisted. Dad, I'm staying at the Creekside Inn. Please come by this evening, just to talk options. That's all I'm asking. Ray looked at his daughter, this woman who had his stubborn chin and Sarah's determined eyes, and found he couldn't refuse. Fine, dinner, but I'm not signing anything. I'll take it, Maya said, the ghost of a smile crossing her face. 7 o'clock. As she walked away, Ray stood alone in the emptying auction yard, wondering what force had compelled him to spend his last $1,000 on a half-dead horse with strange markings. Ray never made it to dinner with Maya. By 6 o'clock, storm clouds had gathered over Shadow Creek, unleashing a torrent that turned the dirt roads to mud. He called the inn to reschedule, promising to meet her for breakfast instead. Alone in the ranch house, Ray sat by the window watching lightning illuminate the distant mountains. Kodiak lay at his feet, occasionally lifting his head at particularly loud thunderclaps. What did I do today, boy? Ray murmured. Spent money I don't have on a horse I can't keep. Maya's right. I'm losing my grip. The old dog whined sympathetically, pressing his muzzle against Ray's hand. At midnight, the storm reached its peak. Rain lashed against the windows as thunder shook the house to its foundations. Ray, finally heading to bed, paused at the window for one last look at the tempest. A flash of lightning revealed a figure standing in his driveway. Ray blinked, certain his damaged vision was playing tricks. Another lightning strike illuminated the scene. Dr. Redhawk, soaked to the skin, leading the colt toward his barn. Cursing, Ray grabbed his coat and flashlight, rushing outside into the deluge. What the hell are you doing? He shouted over the storm. Elena's face was grim, rain plastering her hair to her cheeks. Had to bring him now. Clinic roof started leaking right over his stall. He was panicking. In this, Ray gestured at the storm. He's been through worse, trust me. She led the colt toward the barn, leaving Ray no choice but to follow. Your barn's still sound. Solid as the day it was built, Ray replied, automatically hurrying ahead to open the doors. Inside, the air was dry and smelled of old hay and leather. Ray fumbled for the light switch, and a single bulb illuminated the space. The barn hadn't housed animals in years, not since Sarah's horse had died shortly after she did. But there were still 2 functional stalls, some old feed, and basic supplies. Elena guided the colt into the largest stall, removing the lead rope and stepping back. The horse moved cautiously into the spaced nostrils, flaring as it took in the unfamiliar scents. He's severely underweight, Elena said, her voice professional despite her dripping clothes. But that's not what concerns me most. What does? Ray asked, finding an old horse blanket and handing it to her. Elena accepted the blanket gratefully, wrapping it around her shoulders. His markings, the star on his forehead, the dapples along his spine. She hesitated. Have you ever heard of sky runners? Mr. Holloway. Ray frowned. The wild horses from the eastern ranges, I thought they were gone, hunted out in the 30s. That's the official story. Elena's dark eyes studied him. My grandfather would disagree. Your grandfather, Joseph Redhawk, He claims to have seen them in the high country as recently as 5 years ago. Ray's photographer's mind flashed to an image he'd captured years ago, a distant herd moving across a ridge too far for clear details, but distinctive in their movement. He'd written it off as ordinary Mustangs. "You think this colt is a Skyrunner?" Ray asked skeptically. "I think he might carry Skyrunner blood." Elena reached into her pocket and extracted a plastic evidence bag containing several hairs. "I took DNA samples. I have connections at the university lab. They can compare it to preserved specimens." Ray studied the colt more closely. Beyond the malnourishment, there was something unique about its conformation, the slightly longer legs, the distinctive head shape. "Why would that matter now? If they're gone, they're gone." Elena's expression turned serious. "My people believed the Skyrunners weren't just horses, Mr. Holloway. They were memory bearers. Memory bearers. Animals with the ability to carry the memories of the land, to sense what others can't." She smiled slightly at his expression. "You think I'm spinning native tales? I think you're a veterinarian talking like a shaman. I'm both, actually. Third-generation vet, fifth-generation medicine woman." Elena's tone remained matter-of-fact. "Science and tradition aren't always at odds, Mr. Holloway. Sometimes they're just different languages, describing the same truth." A crack of thunder punctuated her words, causing the colt to start nervously. Instantly, Kodiak, who had followed them into the barn, moved to the stall's edge, his presence somehow calming the young horse. "Your dog has a gift," Elena observed. "He's just old and calm," Ray replied, though he'd noticed the unusual interaction himself. "He knows a kindred spirit when he sees one." Elena turned toward the door. "I should go. Storm's going to get worse before it gets better." "You can't drive in this," Ray protested. "The creek crossing will be flooded by now." Elena sighed, acknowledging the truth of his words. "Is there a hotel nearby?" "Nothing within safe driving distance." Ray ran a hand through his wet hair. "Look, the house has a spare room. Sarah's studio. It's not much, but it's dry." Elena hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. Just until morning." As they headed back toward the house, Ray paused, glancing back at the barn. For just a moment, in the flash of lightning, the colt's star markings seemed to glow with an inner light. "What will you call him?" Elena asked, following his gaze. Ray thought for a moment. "Echo," he said finally. "His name is Echo." Ray dreamed of mountains that night. Not the familiar ranges of Shadow Creek, but older peaks, more primeval. In the dream, he stood at the edge of a vast plain, camera in hand, watching as horses with star markings galloped through tall grass. Their hooves struck the earth with a rhythm that resonated through his bones, and their voices, not neighs but something deeper, more resonant, echoed across the landscape. "They're speaking," Sarah said beside him, though. When he turned to look at her, she wasn't there. "What are they saying?" Ray asked the empty air. "Listen with more than your ears," came the reply, though whether from Sarah or the wind he couldn't tell. The scene shifted. The plain became a laboratory, sterile and cold. The horses were confined in glass chambers, electrodes attached to their star markings. Men in suits stood watching as the animals' distress grew, their voices building to a crescendo that shattered the glass. Ray woke with a gasp, his heart pounding. Beside his bed, Kodiak whined anxiously, paws fidgeting against the floorboards. "Just a dream, boy," Ray murmured, though the images clung to him with unusual vividness. He glanced at the clock, 5:17 a.m. First light would be breaking over the mountains. He dressed quickly and headed downstairs, surprised to find Elena already awake, seated at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee. "Hope you don't mind," she said, gesturing to the coffee pot. "I'm an early riser." "No problem." Ray poured himself a cup, noticing a stack of papers on the table. "What's all this?" "Research. I've been documenting sightings of horses matching Skyrunner descriptions for years. Most are dismissed as Mustang variants, but the pattern is too consistent." She pushed a map toward him. "The reports concentrate here in the eastern ranges, especially near the old Blackwood mining claims." Ray studied the map. "Those claims were abandoned decades ago. Too remote, too little return." "According to official records, yes." Elena took a sip of coffee. "But my grandfather insists there's been activity there recently. Unmarked vehicles, ground disturbances." "What would that have to do with horses?" Elena hesitated. There's an old Cherokee belief that certain animals can sense what's beneath the earth water minerals energy lines. Skyrunners were said to be particularly sensitive. Ray would have dismissed this as superstition a day ago. Now with the dream still vivid in his mind, he found himself considering it. You think Blackwood is using horses to find mining deposits? I think it's worth investigating why a real estate developer suddenly developed an interest in a malnourished colt with Skyrunner markings. Elena gathered her papers. I should check on Echo before I head out. They walked to the barn together, the morning air fresh after the storm. Puddles reflected the pink-gold light of dawn, and somewhere in the distance a meadowlark called. Echo stood alert in his stall, looking better than he had the night before. His eyes tracked them as they entered, intelligent and assessing. He's watching us like he knows something we don't, Ray observed. Maybe he does. Elena approached the stall slowly. Skyrunners were said to recognize those who could hear them. Hear them how? Not with your ears. Elena smiled slightly. You had dreams last night, didn't you? About horses? Ray stared at her. How could you know that when happens to those who connect with them? My grandfather calls it the echo memories carried in the blood passed down through generations. Echo approached the stall door, extending his muzzle toward Ray. Instinctively, Ray reached out. The moment their contact made contact, a jolt of sensation passed through him. Not pain, but awareness, like suddenly remembering something long forgotten. Images flashed through his mind. Mountains seen from unfamiliar angles, streams he'd never visited, caves hidden beneath overgrown hillsides. For a brief moment, his damaged eyes seemed to clear the shadows, giving way to perfect vision. Ray jerked back, breaking the contact. The visions vanished, his right eye returning to its limited perception. What the hell was that? He gasped. Elena watched him with intense interest. What did you see? Places, landscapes I've never photographed. Ray struggled to articulate the experience. It was like seeing through someone else's memories. Not someone, Elena corrected quietly. Something, the land itself perhaps, carried in Echo's bloodline. Ray would have scoffed if he hadn't experienced it himself. Instead, he approached Echo again, more cautiously this time. The horse made a soft sound, not quite a neigh, more like a low thrumming call that seemed to vibrate in Ray's chest. He's calling, Elena whispered wonder in her voice. I've only heard my grandfather describe it. The echo voice, how they communicate with each other across distances. Echo made the sound again, and this time Ray felt rather than saw a response, a sensation of other presences, distant but aware, acknowledging Echo's call. There are others, Ray murmured, out there somewhere. The moment was shattered by the sound of tires on gravel. Maya's rental car pulled into the driveway, followed by a black SUV with tinted windows. That's Blackwood's vehicle, Ray said, tension returning to his voice. Elena quickly slipped the DNA samples back into her pocket. I should go. I'll be in touch about the test results. What do I do with Echo in the meantime? Just be with him. Talk to him. Let him know he's safe. She paused at the barn door. And Mr. Holloway, be careful what you share with others. Some would dismiss what you experienced as imagination or hallucination, and others would recognize its value and exploit it. As Elena slipped out the back of the barn, Ray steeled himself for the confrontation to come. Something told him that his impulsive purchase of Echo had set events in motion that would change everything. Maya was already halfway to the barn, her expression a mixture of concern and frustration. Behind her, Preston Blackwood emerged from the SUV, his tailored ranch wear immaculate, despite the muddy surroundings. Dad, we need to talk, Maya called. You missed dinner, and now I find out you've involved yourself in a potential legal issue. Legal issue? Ray echoed, stepping out of the barn to intercept them before they could see Echo. What are you talking about? Blackwood smiled his corporate smile. Just a misunderstanding, I'm sure. That colt you purchased yesterday, there's some question about whether it should have been available for auction at all. It was found on your property line starving, Ray countered. If anything, there should be questions about neglect. Blackwood's smile didn't falter. It appears the animal may have strayed from a conservation project we're developing, the Shadow Creek Skyrunner Preservation Initiative. Since when do you care about horse conservation? Ray couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. People change, Mr. Holloway. My company is committed to sustainable development and environmental stewardship. Blackwood gestured expansively. In fact, your property would make an excellent addition to the conservation corridor we're establishing. So that's what this is about. Another attempt to buy me out. Maya stepped between them. Dad, please. Mr. Blackwood has concerns about the horse's welfare, that's all. And frankly, so do I. You can barely maintain this place as it is. Maya's right, Blackwood added smoothly. Our initiative has state-of-the-art facilities, specialized veterinary care. The colt would receive everything it needs. His name is Echo, Ray said firmly, and he's not for sale. Everything has a price, Mr. Holloway. Blackwood replied, his tone hardening slightly. Even sentimentality. Not mine, Shimonkun. Blackwood studied him for a moment, then nodded thoughtfully. Very well, but I should warn you, if that animal is indeed a Skyrunner variant, it falls under endangered species protection. The Fish and Wildlife Service takes a dim view of private citizens, attempting to keep endangered animals without proper facilities or expertise. The threat was clear. Ray stood his ground. If you're so concerned about endangered species, why was he found half-starved on your property line? A question I intend to investigate thoroughly, Blackwood assured him. In the meantime, I hope you'll reconsider our offer. For everyone's benefit. He turned to Maya. Ms. Holloway, we still have that meeting at 11. Shall we? Maya hesitated, looking at Ray. Dad, go, Ray said quietly. Do your job. I'll be fine. She searched his face, then nodded. I'll call you later. We still need to talk about the bank. As they drove away, Ray returned to the barn. Echo stood watching him, those intelligent eyes seemingly aware of everything that had transpired. Well, boy, Ray murmured, it seems we've stirred up a hornet's nest. Echo made that strange, resonant sound again, the echo voice Elena had called it. This time Ray was certain he heard a response, faint but unmistakable, from the distant mountains. A call and answer passed from ridge to ridge, an echo of something ancient returning after years of silence. For the next week, Ray devoted himself entirely to Echo's care. The $1,000 he'd spent at auction was just the beginning. Feed supplements, basic equipment, each necessity dug him deeper into financial trouble. But with every passing day, Echo's health improved, his coat beginning to shine, the dull resignation in his eyes replaced by alert curiosity. Elena visited every other day, documenting Echo's recovery and gathering more data for her research. She brought supplies when she could, refusing payment despite Ray's protests. Consider it an investment in discovery, she said one afternoon, helping Ray repair a section of fence. The university lab confirmed it. Echo carries Skyrunner DNA, nearly pure lineage based on comparison with preserved specimens. What does that mean for him? It means he's incredibly rare, possibly one of the last of his kind. Elena hesitated. It also means Blackwood wasn't entirely wrong about the endangered species issue. If this became official, there would be questions about whether a private citizen should have custody. Ray drove a fence post into the ground with more force than necessary. Blackwood doesn't care about conservation. He wants something from Echo, or he wouldn't be so interested. I agree, the question is what? That evening, after Elena had gone, Ray sat in the pasture watching Echo explore his surroundings. Kodiak lay nearby, his aging eyes tracking the young horse's movements with proprietary interest. The unlikely bond between the old dog and the traumatized colt had strengthened daily. Kodiak, often sleeping outside Echo's stall, as if standing guard. Ray found himself taking photographs again, not with his professional equipment, but with an old digital camera he'd found in a drawer. Nothing gallery-worthy, just documentation. Echo's star marking, the distinctive dapples along his spine, the intelligent eyes that seemed to see more than an ordinary horse should. That night, Ray dreamed again. This time he stood on a ridge overlooking a hidden valley. Echo stood beside him, full-grown and powerful in the dream. Below them, machines excavated the earth, cutting into the mountain itself. They're looking for it. Sarah's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The memory of the mountain. Memory, Ray asked. Mountains don't have memories. Everything remembers, Sarah replied. Rocks hold time. Water carries stories. The horses remember it all. Echo made the echo voice sound, but in the dream Ray understood it perfectly, a warning, a call to action. They're breaking the circle. The memories will be lost. Ray woke to find Kodiak standing by his bed whining urgently. Outside, a vehicle's headlights swept across the property, then went dark. Ray grabbed his shotgun from the closet. He'd never fired it, but trespassers wouldn't know that, and moved cautiously to the window. A figure moved through the shadows toward the barn. Ray recognized the familiar gait of Jonas Creed, his nearest neighbor, an occasional handyman. What was Jonas doing here at Ray? Checked the clock, 2:17 in the morning. Setting the shotgun aside, Ray pulled on boots and a jacket, slipping out the back door to circle around behind the barn. By the time he reached the rear entrance, Jonas was already inside a flashlight beam playing across Echo's stall. "Little bit late for a social call, isn't it, Jonas?" Ray said, making the man jump. Jonas turned, his weathered face caught in the beam of his own flashlight. "Ray, God damn it, you scared me half to death." "That makes two of us. What are you doing in my barn at 2 in the morning?" Jonas lowered the flashlight shadows, concealing his expression. "Thought I saw lights out here. Came to check if you had trouble." From the road at night, Ray didn't bother hiding his skepticism. Jonas's property bordered Northwind Edge to the south, but his house was a good mile away with a ridge between them. "Try again." Jonas sighed, shoulders slumping. "Fine. Heard you bought a horse at auction. Wanted to see if the rumors were true." "What rumors?" "That it's got Skyrunner markings." Jonas shone his light briefly on Echo, who watched them warily from the back of his stall. "Damn, it really does. So they're supposed to be extinct, worth a fortune to collectors." Jonas shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Ray, I'm in a bad way. Bank's after my place, too. Thought maybe if we could, I don't know, breed it or something." The explanation rang false, but Ray couldn't pinpoint why. Jonas had always been a straight shooter, as honest as the Montana sky was wide. "You could have asked in daylight, Jonas." "Yeah, well, didn't want to look a fool if it was just talk." Jonas backed toward the door. "Sorry for the scare. I'll head out now. Next time, call first." "Will do." Jonas paused at the door. "Ray, be careful with that animal. There's folks interested in it that you don't want attention from." "Like who? Can't say. Just watch your back." After Jonas left, Ray spent the rest of the night in the barn, shotgun across his knees, watching Echo sleep. Something wasn't adding up. Jonas's story, Blackwood's sudden interest in conservation, Elena's theories about memory-bearing horses. It all circled around Echo like planets around a sun. At dawn, Ray called Maya. "I need information," he said when she answered, "about Blackwood's Skyrunner conservation project. Anything you can find. Dad-client confidentiality isn't absolute when there's potential illegal activity. You taught me that." Ray took a breath. "Maya, something's not right here. Blackwood, Jonas, maybe others, they want Echo. Not for conservation." A pause. "What makes you so sure?" "Call it instinct, or call it the fact that Jonas Creed broke into my barn at 2 a.m. to get a look at him." "Jonas?" Maya sounded genuinely surprised. "But he's been your friend for years." "Exactly, which means something has him spooked enough to risk that friendship." Ray watched Echo moving around his stall, more energetic than he'd been since arriving. "Will you help me?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'll see what I can find, legally. But Dad, be careful. If Blackwood is involved in something questionable, he's not someone you want as an enemy." "Too late for that," Ray replied grimly. "I think I became his enemy the day I refused to sell." After hanging up, Ray returned to the barn to find Echo making the echo voice sound again, that resonant thrumming call that seemed to vibrate in the air. This time, Ray was certain he heard a response from the mountains, distant but unmistakable. Echo turned to look at him, and for a moment, just the briefest flash, Ray's damaged eye cleared again, revealing not the inside of the barn, but a high mountain ridge, a hidden valley, and horses with star markings moving across a meadow. Then it was gone, leaving Ray with the certainty that whatever connected Echo to this land, whatever memories Elena believed the horses carried, it was real and worth protecting. Autumn deepened its hold on Shadow Creek as October gave way to November. The last of the fire-red leaves surrendered to the wind, leaving skeletal branches etched against increasingly leaden skies. First frost came early, rimming the edges of puddles with delicate crystalline patterns that crunched beneath boots in the pre-dawn hours. Echo thrived despite the coming cold. Under Ray's care, and with Elena's guidance, the colt's ribs no longer showed beneath his coat, which had developed a rich bay luster. The star marking on his forehead seemed to glow in certain lights, and the dapples along his spine had become more pronounced, forming a pattern Elena said was characteristic of pure Skyrunner lineage. His recovery is remarkable, she noted one afternoon, recording Echo's measurements in a worn notebook. Most horses with his degree of malnourishment would take months to show this kind of improvement. Ray nodded, watching Echo explore the small paddock they'd constructed together. He still won't let me touch his head, though. Flinches every time I get near. Trauma leaves marks we can't see, Elena replied. Give him time. Time, however, was something Ray found himself increasingly short on. The bank had set a final deadline for the outstanding mortgage payments, December 1st, barely 3 weeks away. Without a miracle, Northwind Edge would go to auction before Christmas. Maya had been surprisingly helpful, leveraging her legal expertise to negotiate extensions and researching alternatives to foreclosure. What she hadn't found was anything concrete about Blackwood's supposed conservation project. It's all shell corporations and vague mission statements, she told Ray over coffee at the Creekside Inn. On paper, the Shadow Creek Skyrunner Preservation Initiative looks legitimate 501c3 status, impressive board of directors, substantial funding. But there's no actual facility, no staff listing beyond administrative positions. A front, Ray suggested. Maya frowned. Possibly. But for what? And why go to such lengths for a horse breed most people believe is extinct? That's what we need to find out. Maya raised an eyebrow. Dad, I'm trying to help you save your property and stay out of bankruptcy. I can't get involved in whatever conspiracy theory you're developing. It's not a theory if it's happening, Ray countered. Jonas has been avoiding me since that night. Blackwood's security team has been parked at the edge of my property 3 times this week. And Elena's grandfather insists there's activity in the old mining claims activity no one is documenting. Maya studied her father, concern evident in her eyes. Dad, is this really about Echo? Or is it about holding on to something, anything after losing Mom? The question struck like a physical blow. Ray looked away, unable to meet his daughter's gaze. That's not fair. Isn't it you've been a ghost since she died? You stopped taking photos, stopped seeing friends, stopped living. Maya's voice softened. Then you spend your last dollar on a half-dead horse, and suddenly you're seeing conspiracies everywhere. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Help me understand. Ray struggled to articulate what he'd experienced, the dreams, the visions, the moments when his damaged eyes seemed to heal, showing him places he'd never been. How could he explain the echo voice or the sensation of memories that weren't his own? Maya would think he'd lost his mind. Echo is special, he said finally. Not just rare, but connected to this place in ways I don't fully understand. And Blackwood knows it. Maya reached across the table, taking his hand in a gesture so reminiscent of Sarah that Ray's throat tightened. Dad, I'm worried about you. You're under incredible stress, financial pressure, the anniversary of Mom's death coming up. Now this responsibility for a horse you can't afford. It would affect anyone's perspective. You think I'm imagining things. I think stress and grief can make us see patterns that aren't there. She squeezed his hand. Let me help you with the practical stuff. We'll figure out the mortgage, get your finances in order. If Echo is as special as you believe, we'll find him a good home with proper care. The very thought of giving up Echo sent a sharp pang through Ray's chest. After just a few weeks, the horse had become more than a responsibility. He was a connection, a purpose, a link to something Ray had thought lost forever. Before he could respond, Maya's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowning at the screen. It's the office. I need to take this. She stood, stepping away from the table to answer. Ray watched her through the cafe window as she paced outside, her expression growing increasingly serious. When she returned, her professional mask was firmly in place. I have to go back to Seattle tomorrow, she said. Partner emergency, but I'll be back next week to help with the bank meeting. Don't worry about it, Ray replied, disappointment warring with relief. I've handled worse. Maya gathered her coat and briefcase. Promise me you'll be careful, Dad. With Echo, with Blackwood, with all of it. Don't do anything impulsive. When have I ever been impulsive? Ray attempted a smile. Yesterday, last month, your entire career. Maya returned the smile with a touch of their old warmth. Just promise me. I promise. After Maya left, Ray lingered at the cafe nursing his coffee and watching the town's rhythms unfold outside the window. Shadow Creek had changed in the decades since its discovery by wealthy outsiders seeking Montana authenticity. The old feed store now sold artisanal coffee and handcrafted souvenirs. The hardware store had been replaced by a boutique selling designer Western wear. Only the auction yard and a few stubborn establishments remained as testaments to what the town had once been. Change was inevitable, Ray knew. But some changes erased more than they created, wiping away histories, connections, knowledge that couldn't be replaced once lost, like the Skyrunners and whatever memories they carried. Penny, for your thoughts, came a familiar voice. Elena Redhawk slid into the seat Maya had vacated, her dark eyes studying him with their usual perceptive intensity. Not worth that much, Ray replied. Maya thinks I'm developing conspiracy theories. The rational daughter confronts the obsessive father. Elena smiled slightly. A classic dynamic. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Redhawk? Just observation. I've seen it in my own family. She signaled the waitress for coffee. My grandfather's beliefs about Skyrunners caused friction with my mother for years. She became a veterinarian to rebel against his superstitions. I became one to bridge the divide. Successfully, sometimes. Elena accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. Other times, I'm caught between worlds, too scientific for the traditionalists, too traditional for the scientists. Ray found himself studying her face, the high cheekbones, the eyes that held both analytical sharpness and something older, more intuitive. In the few weeks since Echo had entered his life, Elena had become a constant presence, her expertise and her willingness to listen, making her the closest thing to a friend Ray had allowed himself in years. The DNA results came back, she said, her voice lowered. Confirmed what we suspected. Echo's mitochondrial DNA matches preserved Skyrunner samples at 98.7% alignment. What does that mean in practical terms? It means he's not just a descendant or a crossbreed. He's a pure Skyrunner, or very nearly. Elena leaned forward. Ray, that makes him possibly the last living example of a breed thought extinct for generations. Last living example we know of. Ray corrected, thinking of the distant echo voice responses he'd sometimes heard from the mountains. Right. Elena hesitated. My grandfather wants to meet him. And you. Why me? Because Echo responds to you in ways that defy typical equine behavior. And because, sure, she trailed off, seeming unsure how to continue. Because what? Because you've experienced the Echo, haven't you? The visions, the moments of unusual clarity. Ray stared at her, suddenly feeling exposed. He'd mentioned nothing of his experiences to Elena, uncertain if they were real or simply the product of an injured mind desperate for connection. How did you know? He asked quietly. You touch your right eye sometimes after being with Echo, like something's changed. Elena's gaze was unwavering. And there are moments when you look at the mountains as if you're seeing something no one else can. I thought I was losing my mind, or finding something you lost. Elena finished her coffee. My grandfather lives in the old cabin at Thunder Basin. He rarely comes down to town anymore, but he'll see you if you're willing. Ray considered the offer. Joseph Redhawk was something of a local legend, a Cherokee elder who had refused to leave his ancestral territory when the reservation boundaries changed, who spoke little but saw much. His reputation as a keeper of old knowledge was matched only by rumors of his stubbornness. When or tomorrow afternoon, I'll drive you. Elena stood, leaving money for her coffee. Oh, and Ray, he'll expect you to bring an offering. Something personal that connects you to the land. Like what we'll. You'll know. With that cryptic response, she left the bell above the cafe door, tinkling softly in her wake. Ray sat for a long moment contemplating what lay ahead. He'd come to Shadow Creek 30 years ago as a young photographer chasing the perfect light over the mountains. He'd stayed because of Sarah, because of the connection they'd both felt to this valley. Now, decades later, that connection was revealing depths he'd never imagined. As he drove back to Northwind Edge, Ray found himself taking the scenic route, his good eye, absorbing the landscape with a photographer's precision. The charcoal sketch of bare aspens against gray skies, the golden stubble of harvested fields, the mountains dusted with early snow at their peaks, watching over it all like slumbering giants. Home. Despite everything, Sarah's death, his injury, the financial struggles, this land remained home in a way no other place ever could. At the ranch, Ray found Echo and Kodiak waiting by the fence, the unlikely pair having developed a routine of greeting his return. The old dog wagged his tail while Echo made a soft, welcoming sound. Not the full Echo voice, but a gentler version meant just for Ray. "Hey, boys," Ray called. "Made some decisions today. Whether he was going to lose the ranch or not, whether Echo was a normal horse or something more mystical, whether Blackwood was plotting something or simply being a typical developer, none of it changed the immediate reality. For now, this was their home, and Ray would fight to protect it with whatever tools he had left." That evening, as the last light faded from the valley, Ray dug through boxes in the attic until he found what he was looking for, his old camera equipment untouched since the accident. The flagship Nikon still felt perfectly balanced in his hands, though dust had settled on the lens caps and battery chargers. If he was going to meet Joseph Redhawk, if he was going to pursue whatever mystery surrounded Echo and the Skyrunners, he would need to see clearly again with both his eyes and his camera. Biranorna. Thunder Basin deserved its name. Nestled between sharp ridge lines, the natural bowl collected storm clouds like a vessel gathering water, amplifying every rumble of distant thunder into something that resonated in the bones. Even on clear days, locals swore they could hear phantom storms echoing among the ancient stones. Elena's truck bounced along the narrow Forest Service road, climbing steadily toward Joseph Redhawk's isolated cabin. Ray sat in the passenger seat, his refurbished camera bag between his feet, watching the familiar landscape transform into something wilder, less touched by human presence. "My grandfather has lived here for 47 years, Elena said, navigating around a particularly large pothole. "Built the cabin himself after returning from Vietnam. The Forest Service tried to evict him a dozen times, then finally gave up and granted him a lifetime residence permit. A stubborn runs in the family, I see," Ray observed. Elena smiled. "Says the man who refuses to sell his ranch despite bankruptcy looming." Touché. They drove in comfortable silence for several more miles until the forest opened into a small clearing. A log cabin stood nestled against the hillside, smoke curling from its stone chimney. Solar panels, incongruously modern, gleamed on the southern-facing roof. A small corral contained 3 horses, all with distinctive markings, similar to Echo's, though these animals appeared older and fully mature. "I thought Skyrunners were extinct," Ray said, staring at the horses in disbelief. "Most people think so. My grandfather prefers it that way." Elena parked the truck. "The fewer people who know they exist, the safer they are." "Then why show me?" "Because Echo chose you, and because we need allies." Before Ray could ask what she meant, the cabin door opened. Joseph Redhawk stood in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow of a fire within. Though well into his 80s, he stood straight as a pine, his silver hair tied back in a long braid that contrasted with the modern flannel shirt and jeans he wore. His face was a map of deep lines and ancient stories, his eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. "Grandfather." Elena greeted him in English, then spoke several sentences in what Ray assumed was Cherokee. Joseph listened, his expression revealing nothing. Then his gaze shifted to Ray, assessing him with the kind of focused attention that made Ray feel transparent, as if the old man could see through skin and bone to whatever lay at his core. "You brought him," Joseph said finally, his voice surprisingly strong and clear. "The one who sees with the wounded eye?" Ray glanced at Elena, who shrugged slightly. "I didn't tell him about your injury. Grandfather notices things." "Come inside," Joseph said. "The wind is changing. Storm coming." The cabin's interior was a study in contrast. Traditional crafts, woven blankets, handmade drums, intricate beadwork, shared space with scientific journals, medical techs, and a surprisingly sophisticated computer setup in one corner. Maps covered one wall marked with colored pins and handwritten notes. Sit. Joseph indicated 3 chairs arranged near the fire. Elena says you have questions about the star horses. Star horses, Ray repeated. What you call sky runners. We name them for the marking. Joseph tapped his own forehead where Echo's star would be. Sign of the memory bearer. Ray reached for his camera bag. I brought something. Elena said I should bring an offering. Joseph waited expression neutral as Ray extracted a large print from the bag. It was one of his most famous photographs, a panoramic shot of Shadow Creek Valley at dawn mountains rising beyond mist, curling through the pines. Ray had taken it the first year he lived in Montana, the image that had launched his career and cemented his connection to this place. I made this picture, Ray said simply, offering it to Joseph. It's how I first saw this land. Joseph studied the photograph, his weathered fingers tracing the contours of the mountains. For a long moment he said nothing. Then with a slight nod he placed the print carefully on a shelf beside other treasured objects. An eagle feather, a smooth river stone, a carved wooden horse. Good offering, he said. Now tell me about your dreams. Ray glanced at Elena, surprised. I didn't tell him about those either, she said. With hesitation at first, then, with increasing openness, Ray described the dreams he'd been having since Echo's arrival. Mountain vistas he'd never visited, horses with star markings, moving across hidden valleys, underground laboratories where something precious was being extracted. He explained the moments when his damaged vision cleared, showing him places and things beyond his physical sight. Joseph listened without interruption, occasionally nodding, as if confirming something already known. When Ray finished, the old man rose and moved to the map wall. The star horses were never just animals. He began his finger tracing a path across the mountains east of Shadow Creek. They are keepers of place memory, what scientists now call genetic memory, but deeper, connected to the land itself. How is that possible? Ray asked. All things remember. Trees record seasons in their rings. Rivers remember their paths even when dammed. Mountains hold time in their stones. Joseph turned back to Ray. Most animals carry memories of their species, how to migrate, where to find water which plants heal. But some species carry more. Memories of the land they inhabit pass through generations. Like a biological archive, Elena added. Information storage coded into DNA and activated by environmental triggers. Joseph nodded. These star horses were special guardians. They could access and respond to these memories, find water in drought, sense dangers beneath the earth, navigate to safe ground during disasters. Our people followed them, learned from them. When settlers came, they hunted the horses, believing they led to gold deposits. They weren't entirely wrong, Elena said. Sky runners do have unusual sensitivity to mineral deposits, possibly magnetic field detection, similar to what some birds use for navigation. But it's not about gold, it's about balance. Balance, Ray repeated. Some places should not be disturbed, Joseph said flatly. The horses know which ones. They avoid areas where extraction would damage underground water systems or release harmful elements. They're drawn to places of harmony. Ray thought of Echo's reaction to certain areas of his property, how the young horse would sometimes refuse to enter specific sections of the pasture or show unusual interest in others. Not random behavior, but response to something Ray couldn't perceive. What does Blackwood want with them? He asked. Joseph and Elena exchanged glances. We believe Horizon Unlimited has developed a technology to exploit the Skyrunner's sensory abilities, Elena explained. Some kind of bioelectric interface that amplifies and interprets their reactions to different terrains. A living mineral detector, Ray said, the pieces falling into place. More accurate than conventional methods, especially in complex geological areas like these mountains. Yes, but the process hurts them, Joseph added, anger flashing in his eyes. Disrupts their connection to the land memories, eventually kills them. That's why Echo was in such poor condition, Elena continued. We think he escaped from one of their testing facilities. He was missing for months before being found near your property. My property, Ray repeated, a new thought forming, which Blackwood has been trying to buy for years. You think there's something there? Something Echo can sense. We think Northwind Edge sits on a confluence of three underground water systems, Elena said, a major aquifer junction that feeds most of the Eastern Valley. Damage it and you potentially contaminate water for thousands of acres. But why would Blackwood want to damage a water source? His developments need water, not damage. Control. Need shining. Joseph moved back to the map indicating a series of red pins forming a rough circle. These are all properties Horizon has acquired in the last 5 years. Together they create a ring around the major aquifers. Control the water, control everything else. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. In the increasingly drought-prone West water rights were becoming more valuable than the land itself. By securing key properties overlying critical aquifer access points, Blackwood could effectively control regional development for decades to come. And Northwind Edge, with its three converging underground streams, was the keystone. Echo recognized your land, Joseph said. That's why he responds to you. The memories of that place are strong in him. But I'm not connected to the land like the Skyrunners, Ray objected. I wasn't born here. I just found it. The land found you, Joseph corrected. Through your wounded eye. Breaks can become doorways. Elena leaned forward. Ray, have you noticed when the visions happen? The moments of clear sight. Ray thought back over the past weeks. Usually when Echo makes that sound, the echo voice you called it, and always near dawn or dusk. Threshold times. Joseph nodded. When boundaries thin, between day and night, between worlds. Outside, thunder rumbled, a real storm this time, not the phantom echoes that gave the basin its name. Rain began to patter against the cabin roof, a gentle percussion that underscored the gravity of their conversation. What do we do now? Ray asked finally. Blackwood has money lawyers, political connections. I'm about to lose my property to the bank. Echo is just one horse. How do we stop this? Not just one horse, Joseph replied. One connection. The star horses are returning slowly, carefully. Their memories guide them back to places that need protection. He gestured to the three horses in the corral. These found their way to me over many years. Others remain hidden in the high country. Echo was trying to reach your ranch when they caught him, Elena added. Testing weakened him, broke his connection temporarily, but it's returning through you. Through me? Ray touched his scarred eye instinctively. Because of the injury, because you were already a seer, Joseph said simply. One who captures images, who notices light others miss. The wound just opened a different way of seeing. Ray thought of his photography career, how he'd always had an uncanny ability to find the perfect angle, the moment when light and landscape aligned in ways others overlooked. Not technical skill alone, but something more intuitive. So what's our next step? He asked, feeling a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Document everything, Elena said immediately. Your property, the water sources, Echo's reactions to different areas. We need evidence of the aquifer confluence that would stand up to scientific scrutiny. And I need pictures of the other facilities. Ray added, professional instincts awakening. If Blackwood is testing on these horses, we need proof. Dangerous, Joseph warned. Blackwood has security connections with local authorities. I used to photograph conflict zones and wildlife poaching operations, Ray replied. I know how to stay hidden. Elena pulled out her phone, showing Ray a satellite map. We've identified 3 possible testing sites based on unusual security patterns and energy usage. This one is closest to your property in Old Farm Horizon, purchased last year, officially listed as an agricultural research station. Ray studied the location, mentally calculating approaches and sightlines. I can do some reconnaissance. No promises, but if there's something to see, I'll find it. Be careful, Joseph said. The star horses are worth millions to them both, the animals themselves and the technology they've developed. They won't give that up easily. As they prepared to leave, the storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows. Joseph stood at the door, watching the weather with knowing eyes. The balance is shifting, he said. Land is remembering. Stars are aligning. He turned to Ray. Your horse, Echo, he calls to the others. Soon they will answer more clearly. I've heard responses, Ray admitted. From the high country, faint but definite. Joseph nodded. The day will come when he must join them. Are you prepared for that? The question struck Ray unexpectedly. In just weeks, Echo had become more than a responsibility. He was a connection, a purpose, a reason to engage with the world again. The thought of losing him sent a sharp pang through Ray's chest. I don't own him, Ray said finally. I'm just helping him find his way. Joseph smiled, the first full smile Ray had seen from the old man. Good answer. The true guardians never claim ownership, only kinship. As Ray and Elena drove back through the storm, the conversation replayed in Ray's mind. A month ago, he'd been a broken man, waiting for the bank to take his home for life, to finally extinguish whatever embers remained after Sarah's death. Now he was entangled in something larger, a conspiracy involving rare horses, water rights, and ancient connections between animals, land, and people. It should have seemed absurd. Instead, it felt like waking from a long sleep. What are you thinking? Elena asked as they navigated the slick Forest Service road. That I need to call Maya, Ray replied. She needs to know what's really happening with Blackwood. Will she believe you? About the sky runners, the water rights, all of it? Ray considered the question. Maya was pragmatic, rational, committed to working within existing systems. But she was also Sarah's daughter, intuitive at her core and fiercely protective of what she valued. She'll believe evidence, he said finally. So that's what we'll give her. The storm had passed by the time Ray returned to Northwind Edge, leaving behind a washed clean world glistening under breaking clouds. The sunset painted the western sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold, while the eastern horizon deepened to indigo. Ray went straight to the barn, finding Echo alert and waiting as if he'd sensed Ray's return. Kodiak lay nearby, raising his graying muzzle in greeting. Hey boys, Ray said softly. Learned some things today. Big things. Echo approached the stall door, extending his muzzle toward Ray. This time Ray didn't hesitate to make contact, placing his palm flat against Echo's forehead star. The connection opened immediately, not as visions this time, but as a sense of recognition of homecoming. You understand now, the sensation seemed to say. Not words, but a knowing that translated itself in Ray's mind. I'm trying to, Ray murmured aloud. It's a lot to take in. Echo made the echo voice sound, that resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate in Ray's chest rather than his ears. This time the response from the distant mountains was clearer, stronger. Not just one answering call, but several overlapping like harmonies in complex music. They were out there, waiting, watching. Ray spent the evening reviewing the information Elena had provided: geological surveys of the region, hydrological maps showing underground water systems, property records detailing Blackwood's acquisitions. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for: a systematic campaign to control water access throughout the Eastern Valley. And Northwind Edge, with its 3 converging aquifers, was the missing piece. Around midnight, Ray's phone rang. Maya, Dad. Her voice was tight with tension. Are you okay? I'm fine. Why? I just got a call from Blackwood's office. There's been a complaint filed against you, alleged animal endangerment regarding that horse. They're sending county animal control to inspect your property tomorrow. Ray's grip tightened on the phone. That's ridiculous. Echo is healthier than he's ever been. I know that, but Blackwood's claiming the horse is an endangered species being kept in inadequate conditions. Maya paused. Dad, this feels like a setup. I tried to see the actual complaint, but it's been sealed pending investigation. It's a pressure tactic, Ray said, anger rising. Blackwood knows I won't sell willingly, so he's looking for leverage. Maybe, but take it seriously. Clean up the barn, make sure everything looks perfect. I've got a morning flight back to Shadow Creek to help handle this. Maya, there's more going on here than you realize. Blackwood isn't just after my property. He's buying up land all over the valley to control water rights. And he's been experimenting on horses like Echo for some kind of mineral detection technology. A long silence followed. Then, Dad, that sounds crazy, I know. But I have evidence: geological surveys, property records, eyewitness accounts. Elena Redhawk has been documenting everything. The vet? Maya sounded skeptical. Dad, I want to believe you, but this is starting to sound like a conspiracy theory. I know. Ray took a deep breath. Just keep an open mind when you get here, okay? See the evidence yourself before you decide. Okay, I'll be there by noon tomorrow. Don't do anything until I arrive. After hanging up, Ray checked on Echo one last time, then retired to the house. Sleep eluded him as he considered their options. If animal control came with a seizure order, for Echo, Ray had no legal grounds to resist. His financial situation was precarious, his facilities basic at best. Against Blackwood's resources and connections, he was severely outmatched. Unless they could prove what was really happening. Ray rose before dawn, driven by restless energy and growing urgency. In the gray light of early morning, he saddled one of his old trail horses, a gentle mare named Willow, that Sarah had ridden for years before her illness, and rode the property boundaries. Echo followed along inside the fence line, moving with increasing confidence as his strength returned. Near the eastern edge of the property, where a small stream cut through a stand of aspens, Echo became particularly alert. His ears pricked forward, and he made that distinctive echo voice sound. Ray dismounted, approaching the fence to watch Echo's behavior more closely. The young horse pawed at the ground, then lowered his head to the earth as if listening. Ray remembered Joseph's words, "All things remember. Mountains hold time in their stones." Was Echo hearing the memory of the land, sensing the water flowing deep beneath the surface? Ray pulled out his camera, documenting Echo's behavior, the specific location, the distinctive posture, the intense focus. Then he knelt himself, placing his palm flat against the damp soil. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, like a radio finding signal, something clicked into place. His damaged eye cleared vision, sharpening beyond normal acuity. But instead of seeing the surface world, Ray perceived what lay beneath layers of soil and rock, and deeper still, three distinct channels of water converging in a natural underground chamber directly beneath his spot. The aquifer junction exactly where Elena had theorized it would be. The vision lasted only seconds before fading, leaving Ray breathless with wonder and confirmation. This was what Blackwood wanted. This was what Echo was trying to protect. As Ray mounted Willow to continue his survey, a vehicle approached along the main road. Not the county animal control truck he'd been dreading, but Elena's familiar pickup. She parked by the barn and hurried toward him, her expression urgent. "We have a problem," she called as she neared. Jonas Creed was spotted at the Horizon Research Facility yesterday. He went in the main entrance and left through a security gate. "Jonas!" Ray's mind flashed back to the night his neighbor had broken into the barn. "Are you sure?" "Positive. My contact on the cleaning staff recognized him." Elena's eyes were troubled. "Ray, I think he's working for them, feeding them information about Echo, about your property." The betrayal stung more than Ray would have expected. Jonas had been a constant presence at Northwind Edge for years, helping with repairs, sharing drinks on the porch, offering quiet support after Sarah's death. The idea that he'd been reporting to Blackwood possibly for years made Ray question everything. "That explains how they knew about Echo so quickly," Ray said, dismounting, "and why Jonas was so interested that night. There's more. My contact overheard a conversation about acquisition preparations scheduled for today. I think they're planning to take Echo while animal control has you distracted." Cold anger settled in Ray's stomach. "We need to move him. Now. Where they'll check my clinic first." Ray thought quickly. "Joseph's place. The basin. They won't look there, and Echo will be with others of his kind." Elena nodded. "I'll call grandfather. But Ray, we can't transport Echo in my truck, too visible. And he's never been trailered properly." "Then I'll ride with him," Ray decided. "Cross-country through the national forest. Blackwood's people will be watching the roads, not the old game trails." "That's 30 miles of rough country," Elena protested. "Echo isn't conditioned for that kind of journey." "He won't be carrying me. I'll lead him alongside Willow." Ray was already moving toward the barn, plans forming rapidly. "We can make it by nightfall if we leave now." Arum. While Elena called Joseph, Ray gathered supplies, water, food, basic medical kits for both human and equine emergencies. He strapped his camera securely to his back. Whatever happened in the coming days, he was determined to document it. Echo seemed to sense the urgency, standing calmly as Ray adjusted a simple halter with minimal restraints. Kodiak watched the preparations with anxious eyes, whining softly. "You have to stay, old friend," Ray told the dog, kneeling to scratch behind his ears. "Maya will need you here. Keep an eye on things for me." Kodiak licked his hand once, then settled near the barn door, assuming his guardian position. As they prepared to depart, Elena handed Ray a small leather pouch. From my grandfather. Protection for the journey. Inside was a small wooden carving of a horse with a star marking worn smooth by handling. I'll call Maya and explain, Elena added. She'll be angry, but it's better than letting them take Echo. Ray nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were undertaking. A month ago, he'd been a broken man waiting for the end. Now he was fleeing across wilderness, protecting a horse that might be the key to preserving the ecological balance of an entire valley. If anything happens to me, he began. Don't, Elena interrupted. Just follow the old logging road to Thunder Creek, then head upstream. Grandfather will meet you at Sentinel Rock with fresh horses. Ray mounted Willow, securing Echo's lead rope with a quick release knot. The young horse seemed unusually calm, as if understanding the importance of their journey. Be careful, Elena said. Blackwood's people won't hesitate to charge you with horse theft if they catch you. They can't steal what was never theirs, Ray replied, with a final nod to Elena and a last look at the ranch he might never see again. Ray guided Willow toward the forest edge. Echo followed willingly, moving with surprising confidence for a horse still recovering from trauma. As they disappeared into the trees, Ray heard it, the Echo voice rising from Echo, stronger than ever before. And from the distant mountains came the response, a chorus of calls guiding them forward toward sanctuary. The journey had begun. Shadow Creek Valley unfolded beneath them as Ray guided Willow along a ridgeline trail. Echo followed close behind his hooves, finding sure purchase on the rocky path. Though they'd been traveling for hours, the young horse showed remarkable stamina, his breathing, even his movements, confident. Ray paused at a natural overlook, allowing both animals to rest while he surveyed their progress. From this height, he could see almost the entire valley, the patchwork of ranches and farms, the ribbon of Shadow Creek itself winding through the landscape, and in the distance, the town's clustered buildings, gleaming in the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there, animal control officers were probably searching his empty barn. Maya would be arriving to find him gone, with only Elena's explanation and Kodiak's watchful presence to greet her. The thought sent a pang of regret through Ray's chest. He'd promised his daughter he wouldn't do anything impulsive yet. Here he was, fleeing across wilderness, with a horse that wasn't legally his. Some father I turned out to be, he murmured, scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. So far, they'd encountered no one. The old logging roads and game trails remained the domain of deer, and the occasional elk, not Blackwood's security teams. Echo nudged Ray's shoulder gently, as if sensing his turmoil. The horse's eyes, once dull with trauma, now shone with alert intelligence. At least you approve, Ray said, running a hand along Echo's neck. Let's hope Joseph's waiting for us at Sentinel Rock. They continued eastward, the terrain growing increasingly rugged as they approached Thunder Creek. Late autumn had stripped the aspens bare their silver trunks, stark against the deep green of pines. The creek itself roared with recent rainfall, forcing them to travel upstream for nearly a mile before finding a safe crossing. As they emerged on the eastern bank, Echo suddenly tensed ears, swiveling toward the forest ahead. Ray instinctively reached for his camera, switching it on silently. If Blackwood's people had somehow anticipated their route. But it wasn't security guards who emerged from the trees. A horse copper-colored with a distinctive star marking stepped into the clearing. Older than Echo, powerfully built, it regarded them with quiet assessment. One of Joseph's, Ray breathed, remembering the 3 skyrunners at the old man's cabin. The horse a mare, Ray now realized, made the Echo voice sound. Echo responded immediately, the resonant call stronger than Ray had ever heard it. For a moment, the air itself seemed to vibrate with their exchange, an ancient conversation humans could sense, but never fully comprehend. The mare turned and began walking purposefully into the forest. Echo strained at his lead rope, clearly eager to follow. I guess we found our guide, Ray murmured, releasing Echo and remounting Willow. Rather than trying to control Echo, he simply followed as the 2 skyrunners moved through the forest with instinctive coordination. The route they took wasn't one Ray would have chosen. It veered away from Sentinel Rock, climbing instead toward higher ridges, where the trees thinned and rock formations broke through the soil like the bones of the earth. Here the wind carried the scent of snow from distant peaks, and the light took on the crystalline quality that had drawn Ray to these mountains decades ago. Echo and the mare stopped at a natural spring, a clear pool nestled among lichen-covered boulders. As the horses drank, Ray dismounted to fill his own water bottles. The afternoon was waning, shadows lengthening across the landscape. If they didn't reach Joseph's cabin before dark, they'd face a cold night in the open. As Ray knelt by the spring, his damaged eye suddenly cleared again. This time, instead of seeing underground water systems, he perceived a network of paths converging on this spot, not physical trails, but something more ephemeral, like currents of energy flowing through the landscape. And along each path he sensed, rather than saw, the presence of horses with star markings, moving steadily toward this meeting place. The vision faded as quickly as it had come, leaving Ray disoriented. He looked up to find both Echo and the mare watching him intently. "Oh, what was that?" he asked aloud, though he expected no answer. "What is this place?" As if in response, Echo dipped his muzzle to the spring, then raised his headwater, dripping from his lips. The mare did the same, then both horses turned their gaze to the east, where a massive stone formation rose against the darkening sky. Not Sentinel Rock, but something larger, more imposing. Shadow Spire. Ray realized, recognizing the landmark from his early photography expeditions. A natural tower of weathered granite that marked the boundary between the national forest and tribal lands. A place Joseph had mentioned as sacred to his people. Before Ray could consider the implications, the distant sound of helicopter rotors reached them. Echo and the mare tensed, looking skyward as the sound grew louder. "Blackwood?" Ray guessed quickly, gathering their supplies. "We need to move. Now." The forest offered inadequate cover against aerial surveillance. Their best hope was to reach the rocky terrain around Shadowspire, where overhangs and crevices might conceal them from view. Ray mounted Willow again, but found no need to lead Echo. The young horse stayed close, following the mare, as she picked her way confidently through increasingly rocky terrain. The helicopter appeared briefly above the tree line, then banked southward. Not searching randomly, Ray realized, but following a grid pattern. They were being hunted systematically. As they approached Shadowspire, the landscape changed dramatically. Ancient rock slides had created a maze of boulders and narrow passages leading to the base of the spire itself. The mare navigated these with practiced ease, Echo following her lead while Ray struggled to keep Willow calm in the confining spaces. Just as the sun dipped below the western peaks, casting the valley in twilight, they reached a hidden grotto at the spire's base. A small waterfall cascaded down one rock, face-feeding a clear pool similar to the spring they'd visited earlier. The space was large enough for several horses, protected from the wind and invisible from the air. The mare stopped, turning to face them. In the gathering darkness, her star marking seemed to glow with an inner light. Echo moved to stand beside her, his own marking beginning to illuminate in response. Ray dismounted, unsure what to do next. Joseph wasn't here to meet them as planned, and night was falling rapidly. The helicopter sound had faded, but who knew how long before the search resumed. As Ray considered their options, a soft footfall sounded behind him. He turned to find Joseph Redhawk emerging from a nearly invisible crevice in the rock wall. "You found the gathering place," the old man said, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "Or rather, it found you." "Your mare led us here," Ray explained. "I thought we were meeting at Sentinel Rock." "Plans change when the star horses decide." Joseph approached Echo, examining him with practiced eyes. "He has grown stronger. The land sustains him. Blackwood's people are searching by helicopter. We need to get to your cabin before they find us." Joseph shook his head. "Not my cabin. Not tonight." He gestured to the hidden crevice he'd emerged from. "The old way. Safer." Ray peered into the narrow opening. "A cave system. A passage. Used by my people for centuries. By the star horses for longer." Joseph took Willow's reins. "Your mount will come with me by the surface path. You go with the horses through the old way." "Underground, I don't have light or—" "You have sight," Joseph interrupted, touching his own right eye meaningfully. "And Echo will guide you. The path remembers, and so does he." Before Ray could protest further, Joseph was leading Willow away, disappearing among the boulders with surprising speed for a man his age. Ray found himself alone with Echo and the mare, the grotto growing darker as twilight deepened into night. Echo approached the crevice, looking back at Ray expectantly. The star marking on his forehead now glowed distinctly, casting just enough light to illuminate the narrow opening. "You want me to follow you in there?" Ray asked, anxiety rising. His wilderness experience didn't include cave exploration, and his damaged vision made the prospect even more daunting. Echo made the echo voice sound not the full call this time, but a softer version, almost coaxing. The mare had already slipped through the opening, her copper coat disappearing into darkness. Ray thought of Maya, of the ranch he might lose, of the life he'd been sleepwalking through since Sarah's death. Then he thought of what lay beneath Shadow Creek Valley, the converging aquifers, the water systems sustaining countless lives, human and wild. The balance Blackwood threatened to disrupt for profit. "All right," he said, finally gathering his courage. "Lead on." The crevice opened into a narrow tunnel, just wide enough for the horses to navigate single file. Echo stayed close enough that his glowing star marking provided minimal illumination. The mare moved ahead confidently, her hooves making little sound on the stone floor. As they ventured deeper, Ray expected total darkness. Instead, he discovered that certain minerals in the rock walls emitted a faint phosphorescence, not enough to see clearly, but sufficient to reveal the general path. More surprising was the effect on his injured eye. Instead of the usual shadows and blurring, he found he could perceive the tunnel with unusual clarity, as if the darkness itself carried information his damaged vision could interpret. The passage descended gradually, opening occasionally into larger chambers where underground streams had carved smooth basins into the rock. In one such chamber, Ray stopped in awe, gazing upward at a ceiling studded with crystal formations that caught and amplified the faint phosphorescent light. "It's beautiful," he whispered, the sound carrying through the space in gentle echoes. Echo approached one of the water basins, dipping his muzzle to drink. As his star marking reflected in the still water, Ray felt a sudden shift in perception, the same sensation he'd experienced at the spring above. This time, instead of seeing energy paths across the landscape, he perceived the living history of this underground world. Generations of star horses moving through these passages, following the water's secret paths. Native peoples conducting ceremonies in these chambers, their songs rising to the crystal ceiling. The slow, patient force of water, sculpting stone over millennia, revealing the bones of the mountain itself. Layered over these ancient memories were more recent intrusions, the shock of dynamite, the grinding of drilling equipment, the contamination of chemical compounds seeping into pristine waters. Blackwood's operations disrupting patterns established over countless generations. The vision ended abruptly as Echo raised his head, water dripping from his muzzle. The mare had already moved toward another tunnel branching from the chamber. Echo followed, leaving Ray to hurry after them, his mind reeling from what he'd witnessed. The passage began to ascend, the air growing fresher. After what felt like hours of underground travel, Ray sensed they were nearing the surface again. The tunnel narrowed one final time, then opened suddenly into a moonlit canyon. Ray emerged, breathing deeply of the night air, to find Joseph waiting with Willow and another man younger, but with the same sharp features and watchful eyes. "My grandson Michael," Joseph introduced briefly. "He will take you to safety." Ray looked around, getting his bearings. They had traveled much farther than he'd realized. Shadow Creek Valley lay behind them, now the mountain range forming a natural boundary between Blackwood's territory and what appeared to be tribal lands. "Where are we exactly?" Ray asked. "Red Hawk Canyon." Michael replied, offering Ray a canteen of water. "Part of the reservation that most outsiders don't know exists. No roads in or out except by horseback or helicopter, and our airspace is restricted. Blackwood can't follow you here," Joseph added. "The land protects its own." Echo and the mare had moved to a small stream cutting through the canyon floor. Other horses with star markings, at least 5 that Ray could count in the moonlight, had gathered there. Their quiet movements, their occasional soft vocalizations, created an atmosphere of reunion, of homecoming. "They've been waiting," Joseph said, noticing Ray's gaze. "The gathering has begun." Gathering. Every generation, the star horses come together when the land faces threat. They share memories, strengthen bonds. Joseph's voice held a mixture of reverence and concern. "This gathering comes sooner than expected. The danger must be greater than we knew." Michael had been examining Echo with professional interest. He's young to join a gathering. Usually only mature skyrunners participate. He carries important memories, Joseph explained, from Northwind Edge, from the water convergence, and from Ray. Michael added, studying Ray with the same intensity he'd shown Echo. The wound connects them. Ray touched his scarred eye self-consciously. I still don't understand how my injury relates to Echo's abilities. Understanding comes with time, Joseph said. For now, rest. Tomorrow brings new challenges. They made camp at the canyon's edge beneath an overhang that offered shelter from the night wind. Michael produced dried meat bread and coffee from saddlebags, sharing the simple meal as they watched the Skyrunners continue their mysterious communion by the stream. They're talking, Ray observed, noticing the subtle patterns in their movements, the exchange of echo voice calls. Planning something. Deciding, Joseph corrected, which memories to preserve, which paths to protect. I need to document this, Ray decided, reaching for his camera. If we're going to stop Blackwood, people need to see what's at stake. Neither Joseph nor Michael objected as Ray began photographing the gathering. His photographer's instincts, dormant for years, awakened fully as he captured the Skyrunners in their element, their star markings luminous in the moonlight, their movements graceful and purposeful, their very presence a testament to survival against incredible odds. As Ray worked, Echo occasionally broke from the group to check on him, as if ensuring his human companion remained nearby. Each time Ray felt that now familiar connection, the sense of memories, not his own, flowing through their contact, expanding his perception beyond ordinary sight. He's bonded to you, Michael noted after one such interaction. Unusual for a Skyrunner so young. I didn't do anything special, Ray said. Just basic care after he was rescued. Care is special to one who has known only pain, Joseph observed. You gave him safety when he needed it most. Ray thought of his own life after Sarah's death, after his injury, how he'd withdrawn from the world, rejecting help from Maya and others who cared about him. How Echo's arrival had somehow broken through that self-imposed isolation. Maybe we rescued each other, he said quietly. As the night deepened, Ray's thoughts turned to Maya. By now she would know he'd fled with Echo. What would she think that he'd finally lost his grip on reality, that he'd chosen a horse over his own daughter? The thought gnawed at him, prompting him to reach for his phone, only to find no signal in this remote canyon. You can call your daughter tomorrow, Michael said, noticing his frustration. We have a satellite connection at the ranger station. Ranger station? I'm a tribal wildlife officer, Michael explained. Monitor the reservation boundaries, track migration patterns, manage conservation programs, including our secret Skyrunner protection efforts. How many people know about them? On the reservation. The elders, a few trusted families. Outside, very few. Elena, of course. 2 researchers at the university who help with DNA analysis, but think they're studying an isolated Mustang variant. Michael's expression hardened. And now Blackwood, though, he doesn't understand what he's found. What exactly is he doing with them? Ray asked. Elena mentioned some kind of bioelectric interface. Michael exchanged glances with Joseph, who nodded permission to continue. From what we've gathered, Horizon developed a system that amplifies the Skyrunner's natural sensitivity to geological formations. They attach sensors to specific points, particularly the star marking, and interpret the neurological responses when the horse encounters different terrains. Like a living mineral detector, Ray said, remembering his earlier conclusion. More sophisticated. The horses don't just detect minerals, they sense instabilities, water systems, fault lines. They can distinguish between deposits that can be safely extracted and those that would disrupt essential systems. Michael's voice reflected professional admiration despite his evident disgust. It's brilliant technology perverted for profit. And fatal to the horses, Joseph added grimly. The artificial amplification overwhelms their natural abilities, burns out their neural pathways. They die in pain, disconnected from the land memories that define them. Ray thought of Echo's condition when he'd first seen him, the physical malnourishment coupled with that look of profound disconnection. How many have they killed? At least 12 that we know of, Michael replied. Bodies discarded in remote areas, made to look like natural deaths. We found 3 near the old mining claims last spring. And now they want Echo back. Ray watched the young horse among his kind finally experiencing the connection he'd been denied. To continue their experiments. Not just Echo, Joseph said. They want all of them. And the knowledge they carry. The gravity of the situation settled around them like the night itself. This wasn't just about one horse or even one endangered breed. It was about an ancient relationship between land and its inhabitants, a balance maintained through biological memory, through connections that transcended conventional understanding. "So what's our plan?" Ray asked finally. "I can't stay hidden forever, and Blackwood won't stop looking for Echo." "We document everything," Michael said firmly. "The Sky Runners, their behavior, their role in maintaining ecological balance. Your property's aquifer convergence, Blackwood's illegal testing facilities. Build a case strong enough that not even his political connections can silence it. And we wait," Joseph added, "for the Sky Runners to complete their gathering, for them to show us the next step." Ray thought of the vision he'd experienced in the underground chamber, the contrast between ancient harmony and modern disruption. "I don't think we have much time," he said. "Blackwood's operations are already affecting the water systems. If he gains control of Northwind Edge, then we work quickly," Michael concluded, "starting at dawn." As they settled for sleep, Ray found himself unable to rest. He sat at the canyon's edge, camera in hand, watching the Sky Runners continue their mysterious communion under the stars. Echo had rejoined them, his movements increasingly confident as he engaged with the older horses. Witnessing this secret gathering, this expression of an intelligence so different from human understanding, yet so clearly purposeful, Ray felt humbled. For 30 years, he'd photographed the natural world believing he was capturing its essence. Now he realized how much had remained hidden from his lens, the deeper connections, the ancient memories, the quiet consciousness permeating everything. "Sarah would have loved this," he whispered to the night air, feeling her absence keenly in this moment of discovery. As if in response, Echo broke from the group again, approaching where Ray sat. The young horse stood quietly beside him, star marking glowing softly in the darkness. Slowly, gently, Echo lowered his muzzle until it touched Ray's scarred eye. The contact sent a current of sensation through Ray's entire body. His vision, not just the damaged eye, but his entire perception expanded beyond anything he'd experienced before. He saw Shadow Creek Valley as if from above, yet simultaneously from within the network of underground streams, the geological formations, the patterns of wildlife movement across the landscape. And through it all, lines of connection, invisible threads, binding everything into a single intricate system. At the center of this system, like a wound in the fabric itself, lay Blackwood's operations. Drilling sites, chemical compounds disrupted water flows. And at Northwind Edge, a pulsing convergence of three major aquifers, the heart of the valley's water system. The vision shifted, showing Ray something unexpected, a gathering of people at his ranch. Maya standing on the porch confronting Preston Blackwood. Elena beside her folders of documents in hand. Local reporters, cameras, microphones. And Kodiak faithful guardians standing watchful at Maya's side. They were fighting back, without him. The vision faded as Echo broke contact, leaving Ray gasping with the intensity of what he'd witnessed. The young horse made a soft sound, not the Echo voice, but a gentler vocalization, almost questioning. "I see it," Ray whispered. "I understand now. We have to go back." Dawn broke clear and cold over Red Hawk Canyon, painting the stone walls in hues of amber and gold. Ray was already awake, reviewing his camera footage and planning their next move with Michael and Joseph. "Maya's confronting Blackwood at my ranch," Ray explained urgently. "Today, I think. We need to get back there." "You saw this?" Joseph asked, his expression revealing nothing. "When Echo touched me last night, a vision clearer than any before." Ray looked to the older man for understanding. "Is that even possible? Seeing current events, not just memories." "The star horses don't experience time as we do," Joseph replied. "Past, present, future all exist within the circle of memory. Echo showed you what is happening now because you needed to know." Michael was more practical. "Getting back to Shadow Creek won't be easy. Blackwood's people are patrolling all access points to the valley." "There's another way," Joseph said. "The same passages we used to come here. They emerge near Northwind Edge." Ray considered the underground journey longer in reverse, and more challenging without knowing the route. Can you guide us? Joseph shook his head. My place is here with the gathering, but Echo knows the way. He came through those passages as a foal before Blackwood's men captured him. You expect me to follow a horse through miles of underground tunnels? Ray couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. Alone. Not alone, came Elena's voice from the canyon entrance. She stood beside a sturdy mountain pony dressed for wilderness travel, her medical bag slung across her shoulder. I'll go with you. Elena, Ray exclaimed, how did you find us? Grandfather sent word, she replied, embracing Joseph briefly. The old ways still work when cell phones don't. What's happening at the ranch? Ray asked immediately. Is Maya there? Elena nodded. She arrived yesterday to find you gone, and animal control searching the property. When they found nothing to justify seizing Echo, she started asking questions, the right questions. I showed her our research on the aquifers on Blackwood's pattern of acquisitions, and she believed it. Your daughter is stubborn, but she's not blind. When she saw the evidence, Elena smiled slightly. Let's just say her legal training found a new target. She's filed an emergency injunction against Horizon's development plans, citing potential damage to protected water systems. Relief washed through Ray. Maya hadn't given up on him after all. Blackwood's furious, Elena continued. He's threatened countersuits, regulatory actions, everything he can think of. But Maya contacted her environmental law colleagues, and they've brought in federal water quality inspectors. The story's gaining traction with local media, Succum, which is exactly why we need to get back, Ray said firmly. With echo and documentation of the Skyrunners, concrete proof of what Blackwood's really doing. Michael had been studying maps of the region. If you take the underground passages, you could reach Northwind Edge by late afternoon, but you'll need proper equipment this time, light supplies, navigation tools. I brought everything we might need, Elena said, indicating several packs attached to her pony, including camera equipment Maya said you'd want. The mention of Maya's thoughtfulness touched Ray deeply. Despite everything, his stubbornness, his reckless decisions, she still understood what mattered to him. As they prepared for the journey, Ray approached the gathered Skyrunners. Echo stood among them, engaged in what appeared to be a final exchange. Heads close together, occasional soft vocalizations passing between them. Will he come with us? Ray asked Joseph. Or is his place here now with his kind? His journey isn't finished, Joseph replied. He still carries memories that must be shared where they're needed most. As if hearing his name, Echo broke from the group and approached Ray. The young horse's transformation was remarkable. His posture confident, his gaze direct, his presence somehow more substantial than it had been just days before. The gathering had changed him, awakening something dormant in his spirit. Ray reached out, touching Echo's star marking gently. The connection opened immediately, but differently than before. Instead of visions or memories, Ray felt a sense of shared purpose, of mutual understanding. They were partners now, bound by something deeper than ownership or even guardianship. He's ready, Joseph said, watching their interaction. And so are you. The entrance to the underground passages lay hidden behind a waterfall at the canyon's eastern end. Michael provided detailed maps of the route, though he warned they would be of limited use in the complex tunnel system. Trust Echo, he advised. His memory of the path is more reliable than any map. As final preparations were made, Joseph approached Ray with a small leather pouch. For protection, the old man said, placing it in Ray's hand. Inside was a carved stone in the shape of a horse's head, the star marking represented by a small crystal embedded in the forehead. A memory stone, Joseph explained, carved by my ancestors when the star horses first formed their bond with our people. It remembers the old agreements, the balance that must be maintained. Ray closed his fingers around the stone, feeling its smooth contours, its surprising warmth. Thank you for everything. Thank me by protecting what matters, Joseph replied. The water, the horses, the memories. With final farewells exchanged, Ray and Elena prepared to enter the passage. Echo moved ahead confidently, his star marking beginning to glow faintly as they passed behind the waterfall and into the dimness beyond. Elena's pony followed reluctantly, eyes rolling at the unfamiliar surroundings. Ready? Elena asked, switching on a powerful headlamp. Ray took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the memory stone in his pocket, the responsibility of what lay ahead. Ready? He confirmed. Let's go home. The journey through the underground passages was both easier and more challenging than Ray had anticipated. Easier because they had proper lighting this time, and Elena's knowledge of geology helped navigate confusing junctions. More challenging because they moved against the natural flow of the tunnels climbing upward, where water naturally sought to descend. Echo led them unerringly, pausing occasionally at particularly difficult sections to ensure Elena's pony could manage the terrain. The star marking on his forehead glowed consistently now, providing an additional point of reference in the dim passages. It's bioluminescence, Elena explained when Ray commented on the phenomenon, a physical characteristic unique to skyrunners. Intensifies during periods of heightened connection to other horses or to specific landscapes. Science meeting tradition, Ray observed, remembering her earlier comment about different languages describing the same truth. Exactly. Elena negotiated a narrow section of tunnel, one hand steadying her nervous pony. My grandfather would say Echo's spirit is shining. A geneticist would talk about specialized cells producing enzymatic reactions. Both are true. They stopped to rest in one of the larger chambers, where crystal formations caught their headlamp beams and scattered light across the darkness. Ray took the opportunity to photograph these underground wonders, knowing such images might never have been captured before. This whole system must extend for miles under the mountains, he marveled. Has anyone mapped it completely? Not with modern methods, Elena replied. My people have oral traditions about the passages which ones lead which connect to surface landmarks. But there are sections no human has entered in living memory. Yet Echo knows the way, Ray said, watching the young horse drink from a clear underground pool. Memory isn't just human, Elena reminded him. The Sky Runners have been using these passages for generations. The knowledge is passed down and coded in their very being. As they continued their journey, the tunnels gradually shifted character, becoming less natural and showing occasional signs of human modification. Ancient hand-carved steps, rough pillars supporting unstable sections, even primitive pictographs etched into the stone walls. My ancestors, Elena explained when Ray paused to examine these markings, recording their relationship with the star horses with the underground waters. One series of images particularly caught Ray's attention, figures representing horses and humans standing together before what appeared to be flowing water, their forms interconnected by carved lines. The first agreement, Elena translated, when my people promised to protect the waters and the star horses promised to guide them to safe places away from water that should remain undisturbed. The same balance Blackwood threatens now, Ray said, photographing the ancient images. They pushed on, increasingly aware of time passing. If they were to reach Northwind Edge by late afternoon, they couldn't afford extended stops, no matter how fascinating the discoveries. The passages gradually angled upward, more steeply, the air growing fresher. Echo's pace quickened, his familiarity with the route evident in his confident movements. Finally, after what felt like hours of steady climbing, they reached a section where daylight filtered through cracks in the stone ceiling. We must be close to the surface, Elena said, checking her map. According to this, we should emerge somewhere on the eastern edge of your property. Echo had stopped, his attention focused on a narrow fissure in the stone wall, not the direction of the visible daylight, but a different path entirely. He made a soft sound, looking back at Ray expectantly. He wants us to go that way, Ray said, trusting the horse's instincts. There must be a reason. The fissure opened into a tunnel they hadn't traversed on their outward journey, narrower, less worn by water flow. As they followed it, Ray noticed the rock composition changing, becoming darker with strange streaks of metallic material running through the walls. This doesn't look natural, Elena observed, examining the rock face with her headlamp. These are drill marks, recent ones. Black wood, Ray guessed. Mining explorations. Before Elena could respond, the tunnel widened suddenly into a large artificial chamber. Their headlamps revealed metal support structures, scientific equipment, computer monitoring stations, all apparently abandoned in haste. Coffee cups still sitting on workbenches, papers scattered across floors. What is this place? Ray breathed already, raising his camera to document the discovery. Some kind of research facility, Elena replied, moving carefully among the equipment. Look at these. She indicated a row of stalls with reinforced metal bars, each equipped with complex monitoring systems. Within each stall, metal plates were embedded in the floor, the size and shape matching a horse's hooves perfectly. Testing stations. Ray realized a chill running through him. For the Sky Runners, Echo had stopped at the entrance to the chamber, refusing to enter. His posture was tense, ears flattened against his head, clear signs of fear and traumatic memory. He was here, Ray said, understanding immediately. This is where they experimented on him. Elena was examining computer monitors, many still active despite the facility's abandoned appearance. These are geological survey results, she said, incredibly detailed maps of underground formations across the entire valley. She clicked through several screens. And these neural response patterns, bioelectric readings. They were using the horses to identify specific mineral deposits, water sources, geological fault lines. Find anything related to Northwind Edge, Ray urged, continuing to photograph the facility methodically. Proof that Blackwood knows about the aquifer convergence. Elena searched through digital files while Ray documented the physical evidence, the testing stalls, the monitoring equipment, the obvious signs of rapid evacuation. Whatever had caused Blackwood's team to abandon this facility, they hadn't had time to remove sensitive materials. Here, Elena called finally, Project Watershed, files specifically about your property. The monitor displayed detailed underground mapping of Northwind Edge, highlighting the three converging aquifers Joseph had described. Notes indicated estimated flow rates, water quality assessments, and potential access points for what was labeled controlled extraction. They're planning to tap all three aquifers, Elena said grimly, not just for Blackwood's developments, but for sale to outside municipalities. They could drain the entire system within a decade. That would devastate the valley, Ray said. Not just my property, but every ranch, every farm, every wild space dependent on that water. Exactly, and look at this. Elena pulled up another file, financial projections, showing potential profits from water rights sales in a region increasingly affected by climate change. The numbers were staggering, making land development seem like a minor sideline to Blackwood's true objective control of the most precious resource in the West. We need to copy everything, Ray said immediately. Every file, every image, every piece of evidence. As Elena worked to download the data to portable drives she'd brought, Ray continued photographing the facility, ensuring they had visual documentation of the physical setup. Echo remained at the entrance, watchful but unwilling to enter the space where he'd suffered. Almost done, Elena announced after several tense minutes. But Ray, there's something else you should see. Files about Echo specifically. The monitor displayed medical records, genetic analyses, and performance evaluations for Subject SK-27, Echo's designation in Blackwood's research program. The data confirmed what they had already suspected: Echo's exceptional sensitivity to geological formations, his unusually pure Skyrunner lineage, and most disturbingly, the neural damage inflicted by repeated testing. They knew they were killing him, Ray said, anger rising as he read through the clinical notes. They documented his deterioration as if he were nothing but a piece of equipment failing under stress. But there's something they didn't understand, Elena added, pointing to notes flagged with question marks. Echo's interactions with you, your eye injury. They were recording unusual results after Echo began responding to your presence, even from a distance. That's part of why they want him back so badly. You triggered something in him they can't explain. Ray thought of the connections he'd experienced with Echo, the visions, the moments of clarity in his damaged vision. Not injuries connecting somehow, but something deeper, a resonance between different forms of perception, different ways of understanding the world. We need to get this information to Maya, he said, to the authorities, before Blackwood realizes what we found. As Elena finished downloading the files, a low rumbling sound reverberated through the chamber. Dust sifted down from the ceiling, and the metal support structures creaked ominously. That felt like blasting, Elena said, alarm evident in her voice. Recent blasting close by. They're still operating, Ray realized. This was just one facility abandoned when Echo escaped. They must have others. Another rumble, stronger this time. Small rocks dislodged from the ceiling, clattering across the metal equipment. "We need to get out," Elena said urgently, grabbing the storage drives in her pack. "If they're using explosives nearby, these tunnels could become unstable." They hurried back to where Echo waited, the horse's anxiety now making perfect sense. He led them away from the abandoned research facility, moving with increased urgency as more tremors shook the passages. Elena's pony followed, nervously snorting at each new vibration. The tunnels began to slope upward more steeply, Echo's pace, leaving them breathless as they climbed toward the surface. Light appeared ahead, not the filtered daylight they'd seen earlier, but a clear opening to the world above. "Almost there," Ray encouraged as they made the final ascent. They emerged into late afternoon sunlight, blinking as their eyes adjusted after hours underground. Ray immediately recognized their location, the eastern corner of Northwind Edge, near the small stream where Echo had shown such interest during their property survey. The very spot where Ray had first perceived the aquifer convergence. In the distance, the ranch house was visible, and beyond it, a gathering of vehicles, police cars, news vans, a black SUV that could only be Blackwood's. People moved around the front yard, though they were too far away to identify individuals. Maya's confrontation with Blackwood, Ray guessed. "Just like in my vision." "Then we'd better hurry," Elena said. "With what we found, we can end this right now." Another explosion sounded closer this time, not underground, but from the direction of the property line Ray shared with Jonas Creed. Smoke rose from a wooded area, and the distant sound of heavy machinery echoed across the afternoon stillness. "They're starting operations already," Ray said in disbelief, "before the legal issues are even resolved." "Blackwood must be desperate," Elena replied. "If he loses the injunction Maya filed, his entire plan is at risk. He's rushing to establish facts on the ground." Echo's attention was fixed on the explosion site, his posture alert rather than fearful. He made the echo voice sound that resonant thrumming call, and to Ray's surprise, an answer came almost immediately from the direction of the ranch house. "Another Skyrunner?" Ray asked in disbelief. "Impossible," Elena began. "Unless—" Before she could finish, Echo was moving, trotting purposefully toward the ranch. Ray and Elena followed, leading the tired pony as quickly as they could manage after their long underground journey. As they crested the final rise overlooking the ranch yard, the scene came into full view. Maya stood on the porch facing Preston Blackwood, who was flanked by security personnel and a man in an expensive suit, likely a lawyer. Several uniformed officers stood nearby, along with what appeared to be county officials. News crews had positioned themselves to capture the confrontation, cameras rolling. And at Maya's feet, positioning himself protectively between her and Blackwood, stood Kodiak. The old dog's stance was vigilant, unwavering despite his age. It was he who had answered Echo's call, not with an echo voice, but with a deep, resonant bark that carried across the property. "Guardians recognize each other," Elena murmured. "Across species, across distances." Echo quickened his pace, and Ray made no attempt to hold him back. The young horse moved with purpose, now his mission clear. As Echo entered the ranch yard, heads turned, conversation stopped, and cameras swiveled to capture the dramatic arrival. "Echo!" Maya exclaimed, her professional composure briefly giving way to relief. Then, seeing Ray and Elena following behind, "Dad, you're okay." Blackwood's reaction was less enthusiastic. His face hardened as he recognized not just Echo, but the significance of Ray's return. "Holloway," he said coldly, "trespassing on my research facility is a serious offense, as is theft of proprietary technology." "You mean Echo," Ray replied, approaching the confrontation with camera in hand and evidence drives in his pocket. "The living being you tortured for profit. The endangered species your people nearly killed with their experiments." "These are serious allegations," Blackwood's lawyer interjected smoothly. "Completely unfounded and potentially libelous." "Actually," Maya said, her legal training evident in her precise tone, "we have substantial evidence supporting these claims, including testimony from former Horizon employees about unethical treatment of rare horses." "Iwa, but now we have more," Ray added, reaching Elena's side and accepting the drive she handed him. "Direct evidence from Blackwood's underground research facility, files documenting their use of Skyrunners to map water resources, plans to drain the aquifers under Northwind Edge." He turned to the news crews, making sure they were capturing every word. They're not after land, they're after water, the most valuable resource in the West. And they don't care who or what they destroy to control it. Blackwood maintained his corporate calm, though his eyes flashed with anger. These are desperate fabrications from a man facing bankruptcy and eviction. Mr. Holloway has been suffering from mental health issues since his accident, as his reckless behavior with the horse clearly demonstrates. Let the evidence speak for itself, Ray countered, holding up the drives. Everything is here, the testing protocols, the health deterioration reports, the water extraction plans, plus photographs I took personally of the facility where they conducted their experiments. One of the county officials, a woman Ray recognized as the water commissioner, stepped forward. I'd like to see this evidence immediately if there are threats to our aquifer systems that falls under my jurisdiction. And mine, added a man in a Fish and Wildlife Service uniform, particularly if endangered species are involved. Blackwood's composed facade began to crack. This is a coordinated attack on legitimate business operations. My company has all necessary permits for our development activities. But not for underground research facilities, Maya pointed out. Not for experimental procedures on endangered animals. And certainly not for the blasting that's happening right now at the property line, blasting that violates the temporary injunction issued this morning. On cue, another explosion sounded in the distance. The government officials exchanged alarmed glances. I know nothing about any blasting, Blackwood insisted, though his expression suggested otherwise. Throughout this exchange, Echo had moved steadily closer to the center of the confrontation. Now he stood directly before Blackwood, his star marking visible to everyone present, his gaze fixed on the man who had authorized his suffering. For a brief moment, something passed between them, a recognition perhaps, or a judgment. Blackwood took an involuntary step backward. That horse is company property, he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. A research subject that escaped containment. He has a name, Ray said, moving to Echo's side. Echo, and he's not property. He's a living link to the history of this land, to the waters that sustain all of us. Your research proved that much at least. Echo made the echo voice sound, then not directed at distant mountains this time, but concentrated in the ranch yard itself. The resonant call seemed to vibrate in the very ground beneath their feet, creating a moment of absolute stillness as everyone present felt its strange power. Then from the direction of the forest came an answering call, and another, and another. All eyes turned toward the tree line as 3 sky runners emerged from the shadows, powerful, mature horses with luminous star markings. They moved with deliberate purpose toward the gathered humans. Impossible, Blackwood breathed. We tracked every specimen. There weren't any left in the wild. You were wrong, Ray said simply. They've always been here, watching, waiting, remembering. As the adult Skyrunners approached, Ray recognized the copper mare who had guided them in the mountains. Joseph had sent reinforcements in his own way to ensure the confrontation ended justly. The news crews were filming frantically now, capturing the unprecedented gathering. Government officials watched in amazement as the Skyrunners formed a semicircle behind Echo, their presence transforming what had been a human legal dispute into something more profound, a moment of reckoning between different ways of valuing the natural world. I think we've seen enough, the water commissioner said finally. Mr. Blackwood, I'm ordering an immediate cessation of all Horizon operations, pending full investigation. This includes the current blasting, which violates multiple regulations. And I'm implementing emergency protections for these horses under the Endangered Species Act, the Fish and Wildlife officer added. Any attempt to capture or harm them will result in federal charges. Blackwood's face contorted with barely contained rage. You have no idea what forces you're interfering with. The economic potential is not worth the destruction of irreplaceable resources, Maya interrupted. That's the legal and ethical reality you're facing, Mr. Blackwood. Your choice now is how gracefully you accept it. For a tense moment, it seemed Blackwood might still resist. Then with a curt nod to his security team, he turned toward his vehicle. This isn't over, Holloway, he said as he passed Ray. Not by a long shot. Actually, I think it is, Ray replied. Echo made sure of that. As Blackwood's SUV pulled away, the gathered officials moved toward Ray, Elena, and Maya, eager to examine the evidence they'd uncovered. The Skyrunners remained at the edge of the activity, watchful but no longer hiding their secret existence, now documented by news cameras, their protection assured by federal authorities. Maya embraced Ray fiercely. "I thought you'd lost your mind," she admitted. "When Elena told me where you'd gone, what you believed—" "I know it sounds impossible," Ray began. "Not anymore." Maya glanced at Echo, who had moved to greet Kodiak with gentle curiosity. "I've seen too much these past 2 days to doubt. The aquifer evidence alone was compelling, but then the former employees came forward with stories about the horse experiments." "You believe me," Ray said, relief washing through him. "About all of it." "I believe in evidence," Maya replied with a slight smile. "But I also believe in you, Dad. I should have remembered that sooner." As the activity around them organized into formal statements, evidence cataloging, and preliminary investigations, Ray found a quiet moment to check on Echo. The young horse stood with the other Skyrunners engaged in what appeared to be another exchange heads, close, occasional soft vocalizations passing between them. "They're deciding," Elena said, joining Ray in his observation. "About what? About Echo's future? About all their futures, now that their existence is known." Ray felt a pang of loss, recognizing the inevitable. "He'll go with them, won't he? Back to the high country, to Joseph's protection?" "That's for Echo to decide," Elena replied. "The bond between you is unique. It might not end just because the immediate danger has passed." As if hearing his name, Echo broke from the group and approached Ray. The transformation in the young horse was complete. His body healthy, his spirit strong, his presence somehow more substantial than it had been just weeks before. He was no longer the trembling, traumatized creature Ray had impulsively purchased at auction, but a being coming into his full power. Ray reached out, touching Echo's star marking gently. The connection opened immediately but differently than before. Instead of disjointed visions or fragmented memories, Ray experienced a sense of wholeness, of completion. The circle closing the story, finding its proper conclusion. "Thank you," the sensation seemed to say. Not words, but a knowing that translated itself in Ray's mind. "Thank you," Ray replied aloud, "for everything you've shown me." Echo made the echo voice sound one last time, soft, meant just for Ray. Then, with a final look that seemed to contain all they'd experienced together, he turned and rejoined the other Skyrunners. Together, the four horses moved toward the forest edge, their star markings catching the late afternoon light. They paused at the tree line, looking back at the humans still gathered in the ranch yard. Then, with a synchronicity that defied ordinary equine behavior, they disappeared into the shadows, returning to the wild places where they'd survived against all odds. Ray watched them go, feeling not loss but completion. Echo had come into his life for a purpose: to wake him from grief's slumber, to reconnect him to the world, to show him that healing was still possible. That purpose fulfilled, the young horse could now follow his own destiny among his kind. "Will we see them again?" Maya asked, coming to stand beside her father. "I think so," Ray replied. "Not as often, perhaps, not as closely, but they're part of this land now, publicly recognized, legally protected. They'll find their balance between connection and freedom." As the sun began to set over Shadow Creek Valley, casting long shadows across land that would now remain undeveloped, Ray felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of rightness, of belonging, of purpose beyond mere survival. His camera felt natural in his hands again as he photographed the evening light on the mountains, the officials examining maps of the aquifer systems, Elena explaining Skyrunner biology to fascinated researchers. He was seeing clearly again, not just through his uninjured eye, but through the damaged one as well, which now perceived connections and patterns invisible to ordinary sight. Echo's gift. Echo's echo. Maya approached with a county official who had paperwork about the ranch's status. "Good news," she said. "With the evidence of aquifer damage, they're considering Northwind Edge for protected status as a critical watershed area. Federal grants could help maintain it while keeping the land itself intact. No more foreclosure threats. Not if you agree to the conservation arrangement." Maya smiled. "You'd essentially become the steward of the property, paid to protect what you already love." Ray signed the preliminary papers without hesitation. After everything that had happened, the thought of Northwind Edge evolving from personal sanctuary to public trust felt right, a natural progression, a way of honoring connections that extended beyond individual ownership. As the officials and news crews finally departed, leaving Ray, Maya, and Elena alone at the ranch house, Kodiak took up his customary position on the porch, watchful even in his old age. The faithful dog had played his own role in the day's events, standing guard over Maya when Ray couldn't be there. "What will you do now?" Elena asked as they sat together, watching stars appear in the deepening twilight. "Besides managing a protected watershed, that is." Ray considered the question, feeling possibilities opening, where before there had been only a narrowing path. "Take photographs again, real ones. Document the Skyrunners discreetly from a distance. Tell their story to those who need to understand what we almost lost. And maybe visit your daughter occasionally," Maya suggested with a smile that reminded Ray painfully beautifully of Sarah. "That too," he agreed, "if you'll visit here sometimes as well." "I already called my firm," Maya admitted. "I'm taking a leave of absence. Shadow Creek Valley needs an environmental attorney who understands what's at stake. Who better than someone with family history here?" Ray felt a completeness he hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Not happiness exactly, but wholeness. The circle broken by loss beginning to mend itself through new connections, new purposes. As darkness settled fully over the valley, a sound carried from the distant mountains, the echo voice faint but unmistakable. Echo's call joined now by others, creating harmonies that resonated across the landscape. Ray closed his eyes, listening with more than his ears. The call spoke of freedom, regained, of memories preserved, of balance restored. It spoke of connections that transcended species, that linked past and present, that unified separate beings in common purpose. An echo of what had been, a calling to what could be. And in the quiet ranch house at Northwind Edge, with his daughter beside him and friends around him, Ray Holloway listened to the message carried on the night wind and answered it in his heart.